as we take a look at this next section for what I believe is 1.5, multiplying and dividing real numbers. Previously, just as a refresher, we've seen that we can add or subtract real numbers. We talked about the idea of a number line, how if we have to add numbers, a number line was a nice way to help us out. What's cool is that with multiplying in particular, we can still go off this idea that we have a number line that we're trying to work with. So before we actually go into the examples, we'll go over a few logistics to talk about how some of the situations that we come across will be shown in the answer itself. So for example, when we're multiplying numbers with the same sign, meaning that we're multiplying with a positive number and a positive number, we end up with a positive product. Notice, product comes back again from dealing with multiplication. We also get this same kind of idea if we have to multiply a negative number with a negative number. But with that being said, this product is slightly different because if we multiply a negative number with a negative number, we end up with a positive product. One way you can think of this, there are tons of ways. If you check online, they'll reiterate this a bunch of different ways, but since we have either positive or negative, you can think of this as an enemy. Negative is an enemy, or think of this as maybe a party, if you will. If you bring two negative people to a party and they interact with each other, maybe they know each other. If they're both pretty negative, maybe the outcome's positive because they're both enemies, they're both negative. So you could think of this as an enemy of your enemy is your friend. You can think about this logistically. If you have an enemy and their enemy is someone that is not friends with your enemy, then they might be your friend. There are a few different ways you can go about this, but we'll see with a few examples. If we were to multiply 5 with a positive 2, these are both positive terms being multiplied, so our outcome definitely has to be positive. If we were thinking of this on a number line, we might want to think of it as if we have 5 versions of 2. So we would have this first version of 2, we would have another version of 2, another version of 2, another version of 2, another version of 2. Notice that in total we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versions of 2, and they're both positive, so this outcome would have to be positive 10. Similar to this, if we had a negative interpretation, so let's say we switch it up, so it's negative 5 multiplying with negative 2. We know that we have too many negative signs multiplying, so this outcome definitely has to be positive. We can also just use the prerequisite knowledge. If we have 5 versions of 2, we can think of it this way. Another way you can think of multiplication is that although with this example we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 versions of 2, we could also think of this as 2 versions of 5, where in blue, let's say that we have this first version of 5, and if we have this second version of 5 going up to 10, we still have that outcome of positive 10. And so this is dealing with when terms are the same sign. That being said, if it switches up where we have terms that are different, so if we have a positive number multiplying with a negative number, the outcome's negative. Same idea if we reorganize this order, since this can be considered commutative with an order. If we have a negative number multiplying with a positive number, this outcome's also negative. And we'll see these in the examples. So with this first example, we're looking at the product again, which is implying multiplying. You saw this in the first section, right? So if we multiply 12 with negative 8, we can think of this as 12 different versions of negative 8. So if we have negative 8, eventually creating 12 of these. We know that we have a positive number multiplying with a negative number. So our outcome definitely has to be a negative term. You might also notice that we only have one negative term seen here. So since we only have one negative term, our product definitely has to be negative. This would produce a negative 96. Because if we add up negative 8, negative 8, negative 8 12 times, that gets us negative 96. Since we're working with this setup here, 24 multiplying with a positive 0.5. So again, this is a positive number multiplying with a positive number. So our outcome has to be positive. One way you can think of this is to rewrite 0.5 as 1/2. So similar to a fraction, this is a safe conversion because you're taking half of some term, where this would have to be 12. If you're curious about the fraction setup, if you're good with multiplying fractions, and we won't see this just in this section just yet, but you could think of this as multiplying across with 24 times 1 being divided by 2. 24 you could rewrite as 12 times 2 times 1, because 24 can be rewritten as 12 times 2. 2 is still on the denominator, so we can cancel out our 2's since we have it here and here. This just leaves us with 12 times 1, which is just 12. Notice that it's still positive. For the next term here, multiplying with fractions, kind of similar to what we saw here previously. Notice that we have a negative term multiplying with a positive term, so this is definitely going to be negative. I think this is a really good rule of thumb to follow through with, and I'll actually highlight all of my thoughts in red because I think this is really helpful even to just frame what the answer is going to look like before you actually get there. I could do these problems all day, but can you? Can you think out logistically ahead of time what the sign's going to be? I think that's a good question to ask ahead of time. So since we're multiplying with fractions, what's nice about this is that we really just multiply straight across in the sense that we can just focus on the top two terms, just focus on multiplying across there. So if we take the product of negative 3 and 1, this is definitely going to give us negative 3. And if we focus just on the bottom two terms, if we just multiply 4 and 2, this is going to get us 8. So notice that our final answer in this case is definitely negative because we only have one negative term seen here. And negative 3/8 is just fine as is. For the next term, I know that I'm working with negative 3 in parentheses being squared. This is a tricky problem because down the road we might see different interpretations where there are exponents involved. But I would personally rewrite this as just negative 3 multiplying with negative 3, really going off of the idea that this is being squared multiplying with itself 2 times. So what do you think this outcome is going to be? We have negative 3 multiplying with negative 3. What sign do you think this final product is going to hand us? Hopefully you're saying, since this is a negative times a negative, again we have two negatives, so we need a positive outcome. So if we multiply 3 times 3, that definitely gets us 9. And notice that our answer has to be positive because these are both negative 3's. So our answer here is positive 9. And then again, I'll make note of my thought process because I think that's really important with this whole section, is just thinking out what's my product going to look like? Does it match up logistically with what I think the numbers are going to work with? And again, you can always go back to this table if you get stuck as far as what the product should be. This section definitely does build, so I think these are really, really important to hold on to as you move forward with this course.